Thank you for the phenomenal introduction and the energy here today. Like you said, my name is Amanda McMahon. I teach art at Huguenot High School on the south side of Richmond. And I became interested in Tim's seminar because I believe that intersection of art and environment is where we have the opportunity for deep time thinking. So how do we think, not on the scale of years or even centuries, but how do we think about our actions and their consequences on the scale of millennia and even eons? So you will notice in my slides our hashtag Huguenot Strong. Like many schools across America, as we grapple with the gun violence epidemic, we got our hashtag after a mass shooting. Nothing puts trauma in trauma-informed pedagogy like having one of your students shot 10 feet from you. One of the symptoms that I wanted to kind of address, the trauma symptoms I wanted to address through my unit, is foreshortening. Foreshortening is a trauma symptom that traps you in this nebulous present. Why plan for college, a career, or your future when you feel like you probably won't live past 18? For so many reasons, we can't afford to think like this. And I believe that art history is the way to address this. Teaching art history, especially on a deep time scale. Present, past, and future are not separate concepts. We in the present are products of the past, and all of our actions affect the future. So, and history is not limited to just human history. So, starting off with that idea of the past, my students explored a millennia in the past, looking at Cahokia, a pre-Columbian megacity in what we now call Illinois. Students reflected on what we can learn about the past through art that survives millennia into the future. So we spent a lot of time talking about what pre-Columbian actually meant. I had assumed going into this that 1607, Jamestown, would be our struggle year, but it turns out 1619 ended up being kind of our struggle year, as students really struggled to imagine an America before the transatlantic slave trade. Despite how this horrific oppressive legacy of slavery and anti-Black racism in America may seem eternal, it completely ensconces their idea of history. To paraphrase Ursula K. Le Guin, so did the divine right of kings. Deep time thinking can help us imagine a world before, and it can also help us imagine a world after. Here, a student very massively connects with the idea of how art is related to all this talk of history by saying that culture is material culture. Everything that we make of our culture is our culture. So I really asked them how we can prove inferences on history based on evidence. So if I'm telling you this is an art object that was owned by a rich person, how can you tell? Don't just trust me because I'm the teacher. How can you tell? Facts on your own. So Cahokia was mound builders. They used agriculture, religion, and architecture to exert tremendous cultural and political power over a large area of the Ohio River Valley. And here a student reflects on how they showed this power and control through their art and through narratives that they tell about themselves through their art, and how art can kind of show who we are and what we believe. Like every teacher, I want my students to understand how to find proof, evidence, sources. So we talked about how stratigraphy, the study of how art and objects left in the soil at certain points in history, can provide proof for these historical claims. So if all of a sudden all this pottery for agriculture is showing up in the soil record, what can we assume about what's going on in their society at the time? We went even deeper into the past and explored the geological history of Virginia through scientific illustrations. Here we have a frankly stunning rendition of the mastodons that lived in Western Virginia. A student depiction of a bolide hitting what would later become the Chesapeake Bay. They were very startled to learn that rocks have hit Earth more than once. Melting glacier ice creating Virginia's rivers. Phenomenal depictions of the dinosaurs that were native to Virginia. A lot of disappointment that T-Rexes were not on the list. A lot of disappointment about that. And then student depiction of sea life, because Virginia was also underwater for the vast majority of its history. So we have the Paleozoic, we have the Precambrian. And why scientific illustration? Science test scores remain one of our barriers to accreditation, and misconceptions became obvious very early. Here I have the figure that humans have only been around for 0.007% of Earth's history, and when I asked students before telling them this fact what percentage they thought, I had a lot of confident 100%, which even if you're following the story in the Bible, as many of my students in the South do, it's not, so we had a lot of questions. We had a lot of discussions about that. Moving on to the art of the present, we looked at the art of Richard and Judith Selby Lang to understand the material that's really the material of our layer in the present is plastic. And so students conducted a plastic audit where they brought in plastic that they accumulated in their daily lives over the course of 2 weeks. We treated it like a fine art object and made sculptures from it, and then drew those sculptures from observation. This was a very interesting part of the unit for me because students did not really understand decomposition. So while I thought that we'd spending a lot of time talking about how it's an issue that plastic doesn't decompose, we instead learned that if you bury your sketchbook out back, it's not going to be there in a year because the paper will decompose. Some other reflections on this lesson is I realized that 90% of the trash they brought in was water bottles. As I tried to address this issue of plastic as a material, I also felt like we needed to address the untrustworthiness of the drinking water, that they would be drinking largely plastic water bottles. Richmond has recently launched an entire advertising campaign being like, guys, we promise the water is safe. I got Legionosis student teaching. And it reminded me of an insult in my hometown. Water person means somebody is stupid, the kind of lead-inflicted stupid that means you're too poor to buy your own water and instead relies on city water. To paraphrase Tim, it all comes down to class, y'all. It all comes down to class. As we moved into the future, this unit was rapidly becoming about waste, the waste that the past has left for us and the waste we'll leave behind for the future. Another waste that will really define this geological strata is nuclear waste. So when we look millennia into the future, we look at this issue of radioactive waste. So this waste will be dangerous for millennia on a scale far past language, far past government. And so as we try to figure out what could mark these dangerous waste sites, art is the only hope that we have. So at this segment of the unit, we explored the ethical issues that are embedded in every single step of the nuclear life cycle, especially here in the United States, and our role in nuclear history. And students made their own long warnings, sculptures that could mark these waste sites and communicate danger purely through symbolism. So we have students that believed symbolic danger, use spikes, dangerous length, dangerous shapes. Students that were confident that modern symbolism would perpetuate that far into the future. I found it was interesting, this was mostly students studying for their driver's test that really were like, stop signs are forever! Which, maybe they will be, maybe they will be. Death was another really common sort of idea of danger, so students saying, hey, if you're going into this area and all the plants are dying, you'll probably leave. Dangerous animals, so students believing that, this fear of dogs, this fear of snakes, this fear of spiders will be universal enough into the future to serve as an appropriate way to communicate danger without language. The one that really devastated me was the student that recreated the Mexican-US border. It absolutely devastated me that this student thought, what communicates danger and what will last millennia, and was like, U.S. immigration policy. So the student told me that the green side with the people happily watching TV is Mexico. Oh, excellent. And then the other side is America. And when I asked him for more information, he said that he needed more green paint. All right. I'll keep that devastation myself then. Thank you, Christian. Through this unit, I really sought to work through trauma with my students, but we ended up seeing the apocalypse not as a singular event, as the trauma as not as our singular school shooting, but rather this sort of ongoing, constant, slow reverberation of terror throughout history. But we also learned that art persists, art survives. So do people, so does hope, and so must we. Thank you very much.